And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I am so excited to present to you tonight Hayley Krischer, who's here to tell us all about her brand new book, These Falling Girls. Hayley, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Here's my book, The Falling Girls,
Yay!
the cover. And
Gorgeous.
yeah, thank you for having me. So The Falling Girls is about these two best friends, Shade and Jadis, and they're both in high school, and they're like the kinds of best friends that are completely inseparable.
Mm.
And they like are constantly sharing clothes and sleeping over each other's houses and just really just like giving each other stick and poke tattoos. I mean, they are completely inseparable. One person starts, the other person begins. But Shade also has this kind of background in gymnastics, and so she's always kind of obsessed with seeing the cheerleaders,
Mm.
and what they're able to do and what they can do with their bodies.
Yeah.
And so she makes Jadis come to all of these, like go to like different cheerleader events, and she decides one day that she also wants to be a cheerleader, and Jadis is like completely shocked because Jadis is like the wild child, and these two are total outsiders. And then she joins the team, and Jadis feels like she's like it's like a breakup, like a real betrayal. And but then it gets even worse when Shade decides that she's completely drawn to a group of like mean girls called the Three Chloes, and she becomes really like kind of entranced by them and is fascinated by them and their dynamics and who they are. And she especially becomes best, like very super tight with the head cheerleader. Her name is Chloe Orbach. And so one night at the homecoming dance, Shade drags Jadis along, and she's like, I want you to hang out with my friends. And then all of a sudden, one of the cheerleaders suddenly dies. And so Shade can't help but think, does Jadis have something to do with it? What's happening? And so that's what happens. That's The Falling Girls.
Ooh, well, you hooked us good, Hayley, and I can't wait to get into this because there's so much to talk about here. High school dynamics that carry into adulthood, female friendships, bullying. Oh my gosh, we're going to talk cheer culture, high school culture, girl culture. We're going to talk about all of it. But first, I just want to welcome everyone who is watching with us on Facebook, on YouTube, on my channels, Murder by the Book channels, wherever you're watching from. You're in the right place. This is the right time. If you've been here before, you know how this works. This is your time every Monday for hashtag Mystery Monday, because you know Mondays can be murder. I give you my handpicked authors and you get to ask them anything. So this is your time. Ask Hayley about her career as a journalist, her career as a writer, cheer culture, her writing practice, how she picked her killer. There's a story there. We're going to get into it. Anything that's going on in your mind, get those questions going in the comments. I'll get them right over to her. I want to welcome Susan, welcome Alois, welcome, I hope I'm saying that right. Welcome Chrissy, welcome Anne, welcome Audrey, welcome Pat, welcome Leslie from Canada, giving us her Canadian hello there. It brings me so much joy. Hey, Leslie from Canada, so good to have you here with us always. So Hayley, let's get right into it. This book is getting all kinds of great reviews. Kit Frick, author of I Killed Zoe Spanos, raving with The Falling Girls. Hayley has woven a suspenseful, poignant, and tangled web of friendship set against the electric backdrop of high school cheer. Like teen girlhood itself, the intensity of these friendships is sometimes beautiful, sometimes dark. Like the best thrillers, it is ultimately deadly. So
Mhm.
let's talk first about this review and about the intensity, both the beauty and the darkness of female friendships at that age and always. Why did you choose to write this as a YA book instead of an adult book?
Oh, that's a good question. I tend to like just write generally. I love writing about that time in teenage girl world. I'm always by it, and I think I'm going to just forever be fascinated by it. And so those stories as a journalist are always the stories that I'm drawn to, and so I think that's why I write about these books. My first book also was a YA contemporary, and So I read this story many years ago about this girl, Skylar Niece, who was killed by two of her best friends. And yeah, really awful story. She was 16 years old, and the two girls ended up going to jail. And I really couldn't understand. And I think anybody who knows the case couldn't wrap their brain around why they would do it. And I sort of was fascinated by what happened between these three girls. How could these two girls just completely plot to kill her, take her out of the house one night and do it? Um, and then one of the girls, when she was finally caught, admitted to the police, we just didn't like her anymore when they asked her why she did it. Which, you know what? I didn't buy it. It didn't make any sense. There was something else going on. And so if you look back at all of their Twitter, this was happened right when Twitter first started. And so they would get into all these fights on Twitter, and like everyone in town at school knew that they were constantly fighting. And they had this very intense struggle with each other that, you would want to say, sort of as an adult, a healthy adult, like, hey, maybe you guys aren't good for each other. Maybe this is not a healthy friendship. Maybe you're not getting what you need out of this. But instead, it just kept like getting layered and layered of all this toxicity. And so I was kind of fascinated about like what happens before, best friends who are especially super, super close, what happens before that moment where the friendship breaks up. Um, and so I really, yeah, wow. Yeah, exactly. It was really intense, and it just made me realize, God, I had these super intense friendships when I was in high school. And I wondered, obviously, murdering someone is not the option ever, but I was really, like I said, fascinated sort of by that toxicity that happened before that. And so that's what I delved into when I started writing The Falling Girls. It's really, the cheerleader story is sort of just this backdrop. It's really a best friend breakup story.
Mm, a best friend breakout story. And it's so fascinating because, when I first of all, I hadn't heard of that case. That is crazy.
Yeah.
But we see, it's such an intense time because of course they're very young, and hormones are raging, brains aren't fully formed. Everything is so dramatic and so intense. And yet some of the dynamics of female friendships, of toxicity, of not being able to just say, you know what, this isn't working anymore, actually does carry over into adulthood, where we continue to see bullying in friendships or adult friendship circles. In the workplace, we see exclusion, and bullying doesn't hurt any less later on. So it's interesting how some things change and some things stay the same. Leisha Haney joining us from Texas, saying, hello, ladies. Sorry I'm late. Leisha, you're right on time. Welcome to the conversation. Great to have you as always. Top mystery and thriller maven community member there. Great to have you. So Hayley, how has sorry, Alicia has a question. She's saying, wow, they had to kill her just because they didn't like her anymore. So sad. So when you delved into this story, Hayley, did you find that there actually was more to the story, or was it just that simple?
There was more to the story, and I think that the girls didn't necessarily say. I think they didn't like her anymore. I think that definitely happened,
Wow.
but I think it was more than that. I think what
Mhm.
happens is I think with teenagers, I think we all know this, is that there is your brain isn't completely fully developed. The rational thinking, conscious, like the choice making part of your brain is not fully developed. And I think that these emotions are so intense, so heightened. You've got all of these hormones raging. And I think definitely those girls were sociopathic, psychopathic. One of them definitely had guilt. The other one, I don't think she did at all. But I think, what happens is that those feelings are so intense. And like I said, I really could, remember that kind of feeling that I had when I was in high school, where you cared about somebody so much and then they hurt you that you did feel like you wanted to just kill them. Now, obviously, I didn't do that, but I don't think I had those experiences in college. I sometimes had those experiences with some other friends where you have this intense female friendship and then you just feel so devastated if the friendship ends. And it can make you feel really alone and isolated. It can make you feel like you are lost and really don't have anything. Especially when you're dealing with sort of with unstable kids who can be really depressed. You can make choices that are really bad for you. And that's sort of how I see all these characters. I don't see any of them as horrible people. In my book, that is. I'm not talking about the Skylar Niece case.
Right.
But they're not horrible. They're human,
Mhm.
and they're human with flaws. And we all have done things in our lives, with friends, in romantic relationships and situations that we're not proud of,
Mhm.
and acted in certain ways that we shouldn't have acted. And
Mm.
so I felt, to me, it just felt very relatable. I wanted to really explore that, especially the toxic friendship stuff. If you've ever been in a toxic friendship, you know what I'm talking about, because there's a lot of blurred lines, between like, what is my allegiance to you, and can I make other friends? And you
Mm.
have a lot of jealousies and a lot of feelings and like loyalties that would probably come up more in a romantic relationship, but that happens in friendships too, especially toxic
Absolutely.
ones. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad that we're talking about this and that you're writing about this because there's a lot to talk about here that often doesn't get talked about on the page or on screen or in conversation. So this is great. Leisha saying girl bullies can be so very, very cruel.
Very.
Leisha, absolutely right. And especially when I mean bullying never stops hurting. Exclusion never stops hurting. Whether you're an adult, I've been bullied as an adult. I've been excluded, and it's always painful.
Yeah.
Amazingly so. We're social creatures. We're community creatures. Leslie saying, Haley, you mentioned your fascination with these relationships in youth. Was this what drove you to write this book? I know I had some struggles in the relationships and interactions with females across life is interesting. Leslie, well said. Haley, can you respond?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just was realizing, through my book tour actually, and talking to so many women about their friendship issues, that I realized I probably also was writing this book because of some of the friendships that I've lost, and even in the past 10 years, recently, not just in high school, but some friendships that didn't work out for me personally. And I think it can be heartbreaking. It can make you feel, you still think about those friends just because they're not in your life. And if you don't know what happened, if you're not the person to break up with somebody, then you can often think about over what happened. Why isn't this person in my life anymore? Was there something I did? Sometimes you're the person who broke up with someone else and it still hurts, right? I mean, it still hurts like just as much. And so I think, I was writing this book during the pandemic, um, really cut off from so many people. And so I think
Mm,
that a lot of that feeling and that, really kind of came through, you know, um,
mm.
but definitely it's not just stuff that happened when I was a kid. It's definitely also taken from things that happened as an adult.
Leacha adding, yes, a lot of times girls that hurt other girls is only because they are envious of the one they hurt. Being words are actually hurting them. And I think
Yeah.
we hear that a lot, right? Oh, she's trying to put herself down because she's jealous of you, or she's envious of you. And I always thought it was something to make the person who was being hurt feel better. Like, oh, but actually, do you think that's true, Haley?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's not, I wouldn't necessarily say envious. But I think envy, and I do mention this in the book, and I think I did. In fact, I might have been like a former draft, but um, I think envy is really equivalent to hate, and it's
Ooh,
not just, it's different than jealousy. And you're not just saying, "Oh, I wish I had that." You're like saying, "I wish I had that, and I hate that person because of it." And so I think that there's something to say, in, especially if you're not the victim, because if you're a victim of bullying, or if you're a victim of, of somebody, targeting you, then you're not necessarily going to be able to see what's happening for the other person. But what I tried to really do in this book is show what's going on behind the scenes of why people are acting, why these girls would act a certain way, why somebody would be so cruel, and it's typically because something's going on with them. There's something wrong with them. And if they can act so cruel or isolate or exclude, and to a degree that's cruel. We're not just talking about like we
right.
don't connect, we don't, maybe that, what, we don't have to hang out all the time, like this is just not a best friendship. Like you just, I think, I wanted to really delve into what that person looks like and what's happening
Mm.
for them at home. I write a lot about mothers and daughters in this book as well. And so there's a lot of stuff that happens between the moms and the daughters, that these girls are acting a certain way because there's stuff happening at home. So
Leslie saying these experiences shape us, whether negative or positive. Now,
100%.
Haley, you yourself were a cheerleader in high school, and you shared that was actually a positive experience for you. You weren't facing, three Chloes who were. You tell us about your good experience.
The cheerleaders were like the sweetest girls ever. They were so nice to me, and I was the worst cheerleader. They had so much patience for me. And I, like my lead character, Shade, also had like a lot of gymnastic like background. I was just really self-taught. I have Shade being way more, she actually was, she was really super competitive. Um, but I saw cheerleading, I think, as a way to maybe kind of get out of that of the person that I had, like, that I was. I was sort of like, was smoking cigarettes in the bathroom. I was kind of like, not really, doing the right thing, not making the right choices, being a little bit of a rebel. And so I think that, like, in hindsight, I probably joined the cheerleading team, or wanted to try out for it, because I went to a very large school, so you had to try out. Um, I think I wanted to do that because I needed that sort of that structure in my life. I think that I wanted sort of like those rules and boundaries, and like a place to actually go every single day after school and have, that kind of diligence. And I think I was looking for that. Once I got on the team, it was a lot harder for me to follow the rules because of who I was as a kid, that I really had a hard time with. Um, but I stuck with it. In fact, I remember trying to quit when I got to basketball season, and my mother was like, "You worked so hard to get on this team. You can't quit. You quit everything. You have to stay on." And I listened to her because I think I really wanted that. Again, I think I wanted sort of that structure. But
Mm,
but yeah, I didn't. The cheerleaders in my book, I think, are also, they're girls who are super intense because they want to do well, and
mm.
they are athletes. And I think, like everybody else during the pandemic, I watched the Netflix docuseries Cheer, which was unbelievable to watch these girls like fly 30 feet into the air. And they got hurt a lot. And so when I started doing some research about it, I found out that cheerleaders were only second to football players in injuries during practices. And you could see why, because they don't have any pads, they don't have any helmets. Not that, I mean, they're doing stuff that is so dangerous, some of these squads. And so I really wanted to show that these girls wanted to push their bodies. They're badasses. They're very tough, strong girls and they're super athletes, and I wanted to give them the respect that they deserved.
I love that. I love the that because I think there's this idea that, cheerleaders are just wearing little, little outfits or little pom-poms, but actually they're athletes and the
Yeah.
stuff that they're doing is especially now is more gymnastics and extremely physically challenging.
Mhm.
Welcome to the conversation, Brenda. Welcome, Karen. Welcome, Melinda. Welcome, Sally. Welcome, Matt. Welcome, Carol. Let us know if y'all have any questions. Um, Haley, Kathleen Glasgow, the New York Times bestselling author of Girl in Pieces and You'd Be Home Now, raved that this is a compelling, crushing, and spot on story about toxicity, feminism, and friendship. The Falling Girls is a knock your socks off novel that packs an emotional wallop, a gorgeous and powerful book about American girlhood. I
Mm.
loved that
I
blurb.
love her.
That's a really powerful, concise, incisive blurb. I feel like when a blurb gets it, it gets it. And clearly she got this book. So
Mhm.
let's talk about from a craft perspective.
Mhm.
How do you pack a quote emotional wallop?
Oh, God, that's a great question. Um, Again, I mean, I think having this platform of where I knew I wanted to write about this toxic friendship and what happens when girls are have this super, super hyper intensity and they to the point where they might wanna hurt each other. Um, because girls are definitely have rage and they have feelings of rage and anger, and they don't just all keep it nicely tied up in a bow. And so I think to pack an emotional wallop in any story, you have to go so deep that it you don't want to even keep going. You have to be uncomfortable yourself to the point where you're like, when I was writing it, I was saying, this is too much. And that's when I realized I have to keep going. Because especially I think, when you're writing with an editor, it
Mm,
helps because I already had the book deal for this. And so, I knew I could push it really hard, and I
mm,
did. I had these girls initially like having fist fights and really pushing it physically to a whole other limit level. And my editor was like, you know what? I think we could pull this back because I don't think that they have to be so physically intense to each other because they're already working so hard as cheerleaders. So let's
mm.
see how they do if they can, like, let's see how that feels, to want to hurt somebody, but you're not going to. How does that feel? So I think there are ways to delve into that sort of emotional wallop when you're writing. But I think it's about really going as far as you could take it if you want to feel uncomfortable and really pushing yourself. If you don't have an editor, maybe you have a friend to read it and they could say, this is good, keep going, or an editor will say, let's pull it back a little bit like mine did.
And did you feel that that was ultimately the right decision to pull it
I
back?
did. I thought, all
Okay.
right, let's try it, because I'm always very open. I'm not one of those writers who I'm like, this is the only way it has to be. I think it's very collaborative and you're just so isolating as a writer. You're just by yourself and you're, with your words and reading and, your computer. It's great to be able to have somebody to sort of put, who to bounce ideas off of. And that
Mm.
could be an editor. I have friends who are readers. My husband is an incredible reader of mine. And I just really ask people to tell me the truth. If you don't like it, tell me why. I really want
Mm.
to know, I want to understand how you're feeling. I don't want to convince them out of their feelings. I want to know exactly why they're feeling that way.
Oh, I love that, Haley. Leachy would like to know, did you have to do a lot of research for your book?
I did. Oh, the
Tell us about
cheerleading
that.
research was the most intense research. It was like writing an article for like a year and a half. It was I wanted to make sure the cheerleaders were not going to come after me and say, "You got this wrong." So I watched so many YouTube tutorials about different tricks, and I read so many cheerleading blogs and message boards, and asked people so many questions. Again, I got also very lucky that my editor had been a cheerleader in college, and so she would say, "This isn't right. You wouldn't land on the left foot, you would land on the right foot." So we got extremely technical. And then the copy editor also got really technical along with us. We all got sort of very into it. Like, okay, this is exactly what would happen. Your hand would be here, her foot would be here. Yeah, it's no joke what those women do, and boy and guys. There's plenty of male cheerleaders as well. It's no joke what they're doing. So,
Did you dust off the old cheer costume and give it a whirl, Haley?
oh my God, yeah, I don't know where that is.
Did you
Um,
try? Did you do any cheering or any gymnastics?
yes, I mean, I think that when you're I did go to like a couple of high school football games, and I hung out. I met some cheerleaders, high school cheerleaders who were adorable and so sweet. And when I saw them throwing each other up in the air, I like hid my face because it's terrifying. But these kids work really hard to make sure that everybody is safe. So,
Yeah, it's amazing because sometimes I watch. Actually, a friend of mine's daughter is a cheerleader, and when I watch them tossing her, as you said, 30 feet in the air and spinning, and then depending on them to catch her because a fall would kill or maim her. I mean, it is terrifying and amazing. It is a physically challenging. It is amazing to watch. It's fabulous. I mean, I love gymnastics, so I'm fascinated.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, there's a great documentary if you like gymnastics, for anybody else out there. It's by Erin Lee Carr, and it's called I think A Heart of Gold, and it's about the gymnastics who were all sexually assaulted by Nasser, their doctor, their team doctor. And it was really an incredible documentary. But it very much talks about how these girls use their body as weapons. And I also really took that into the book as well, that
mm.
they're not just like performing for you. They're doing this as this, very intense, if you're looking at other sports, that's how these boys and girls, when they're playing soccer or something like that, or volleyball, they're using their body, to shield other players. So cheerleaders are doing the same thing, but they're whipping their bodies individually doing that. So it's, yeah, really, really great documentary.
Amazing. I want to remind y'all to grab your copy of the book tonight. I'm putting the link in the comments. Support a female-owned bookstore and grab your copy of The Falling Girls. Here is the link right now in the comments wherever you're watching. Grab it tonight so that you too can enjoy this emotional wallop of a book. Getting so many great reviews. Booklist raving that this sophomore novel, which means Haley's second book, explores the kinds of toxic relationships that teenagers often find themselves in. A heavy dose of cheer terminology immerses readers in that world, while strong themes of independence, friendship, and boundaries will speak to teen readers. It is gripping, raves Booklist. So grab your copy of this gripping book tonight. I'm popping the link in the comments to that review as well. Haley also wrote an article about cheer culture for the New York Times. I put the link to that as well so that you can check that out. Now, Haley, how would you say that your training as a journalist informed and shaped and also differed from writing a book? Did it help you to write more succinctly? I know I can ramble on but you're maybe used to writing articles. You write a tighter writer, or was it two totally different animals? Fill us in on that.
Yeah, that's good. Also a great question. I think when you're writing fiction, you have to just kind of write very messy and very
Mm,
sloppy, and just kind of allow all of that to sort of fall on the page. I do something similar with I tend to write very long articles when I'm writing
mhm.
when I'm doing articles, features. Um, but I think with writing fiction, you have to sort of always think to yourself, more, write more, because you can
Mhm.
always take away, because adding is kind of constantly part of the process. And so, for this cheer mom story that I wrote for the New York Times, I think I sent my editor like 4,000 words or something insane. And, we did cut it down a little bit to like 3,000, but it's a very long article. But I really like that. I like being able to just put it all out there, and then you could always shave it back, you know? So I think the other thing too about my books is my first book was called Something Happened to Allie Greenleaf, and it was also about sexual assault. Um, and I did use a lot of research for that book as well. And I looked at different cases, and I looked at a lot of different studies, and also researched certain police tactics. And so I think between that book and this book, I seem to really like kind of ripped from the headlines books.
Mhm.
I like being able to see what happened to real people and really delve into that. It's part of my journalism background. I think that that's just what I'm personally attracted to.
I'm personally attracted to that too. I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. Leisha saying your book sounds very intriguing and a must read
Mhm.
for all. Thank you for sharing about it. Leisha, thank you for joining us. As
Thank
always,
you.
a pleasure to have you. Kirkus also raved about this book, saying high school drama cliques, jealousy, obsession, the power of friendship, and the toxicity of codependence are explored with sensitivity, all balanced seamlessly against family dynamics, making an unusually complex story. They called it engrossing. Congratulations on that rave review from Kirkus, who I believe the New York Times called reliably curmudgeonly, reliably cantankerous and curmudgeonly. So we know that praise don't come cheap. So congratulations on that amazing, amazing review from them. I just want to make sure I didn't got everything here. Oh, I want to include Jessica Goodman's review. She called this book riveting. And the praise just keeps coming. A riveting, intimate portrayal of just how intense and all-consuming female friendships can be, urgent and piercing. The Falling Girls is a gut punch of a book. Jessica Goodman, New York Times bestselling author of They Wish They Were Us and They'll Never Catch Us. Hayley, it looks like we're almost out of time. So if anyone has any last questions, we have 2 minutes left. So get your questions going for Hayley. Hayley, if there's anything that you would like to share with us. Oh, I wanted to make sure to ask you,
Yeah.
Hayley, you changed your killer 3 times. Tell us the story.
Oh, yes.
Who was the killer and how and why you did it?
You know what? I This was my first thriller, and I really had such a hard time. I felt so bad. Characters are like your babies, and I felt so bad. I had like, I could not decide between a couple of killers, and I was just every time I went to my editor, I kept changing it. And she was very sweet about it. She was like a therapist to me about it, because I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't want to make this person a killer. I just, I think that when you get attracted to your characters, I don't know how other thriller writers do it. They just like kill people off, and it's, no big deal. It's constantly book after book. That person's gone. I had so much guilt. I felt terrible. So I kept going back and changing it.
How did you finally make the decision?
You have to just, I finally just went into like really the psychological depth of it. Okay. What are the stakes for this person, and what are the stakes for this other person? And I think I kind of just did like a pros and cons kind of in my head, and just kept writing it until I decided, okay, this has to be it. This has to be it. This is the only way it's going to work. And it just it worked. I felt good about it. It was but I had to really write through it. It just goes to show you that writers, sometimes the thing that we're supposed to be writing first kind of can come last. And I thought I knew who the killer was right from the beginning, and then I changed her a bunch of times. So
Did it feel right in your bones?
Yes, it
Yeah.
did. It did. It felt right in my bones. It did. It was, I knew I wasn't just throwing somebody under the bus. I had a really I
Mm,
really I knew that this person was aching themselves. Like
mm.
I'm not trying to excuse any murderers, or any murdering, but I ached for her. I ached for her. So, yeah. I don't wanna
I
give anything away,
I
so
like that
I'm
you even
I'm
have
trying to,
specificity.
like, keep it very vague, but,
Yes,
um
yes. We have a no spoiler policy here. Welcome, Elizabeth, Jean. Welcome, Stephanie. Welcome, everybody. Oh, I have missed one more question. Leisha would like to know, did you have your title before you wrote the book or after? Leisha, great question, because this
Yeah.
is a cool title. Tell us the story of the title, Hayley.
Yeah. Well, the girls, Shade, the best friends, Shade and Jadis, give each other stick and poke tattoos. And then something happens where Shade ends up giving Chloe Orbach, one of the cheerleaders, also a stick and poke tattoo. And so that becomes an issue with the girls in the book. Everyone's very upset about these tattoos because it's a real symbol of like, you're my best friend. No, you're
Yeah.
my best friend. So and then one of the characters actually says, when you tattoo somebody, you own a little piece of them. And so that just goes to show you how layered these intense friendships are. But so the original name of the book was called Stick and Poke. And I went with that for a long time, but the Penguin wanted to change it. So we went with the Falling Girls. And there's a lot of reasons why. And also, again, I don't want to spoil why, but if you read the book, you'll completely understand. There's multiple reasons why it's called the Falling Girls. So.
Did they come up with this Falling Girls, Hayley, or you did?
We all kind of came up with like a list of different titles and then it settled on, I think they said that Stick and Poke wasn't quite right. And did I have any other ideas? And I did. So, because I knew that they weren't going to love Stick and Poke. I don't know why, but I think a lot of people, when they're reading this book, they're saying, what is a Stick and Poke tattoo?
I actually didn't know. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's good. So thank you. All right. I want to remind everyone, grab your copy of this book tonight. Shop local. This weekend was Small Business Saturday, but every weekend should be Small Business Saturday, because if we want to have bookstores to browse and book aisles to wander and book experts to chat with, we've got to put our money where our mouth is and shop female-owned, independent bookstores, everybody. Oh, Leacha's saying, thank you so much for answering my questions. It has been very nice to meet you and to learn about your book. Leacha, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you
You
so much
too.
for
Thank you.
joining us. Okay, everybody, I popped the link in one more time. Grab your copy at murderbooks.com. Here is the link. A perfect gift for yourself or for others. Also, we're almost we're overtime, but I just have to say, you also got a rave review from the Seattle Times by an actual teen
Oh, that was great.
reviewer.
Yeah.
So that was really cool to see that they asked a young adult what to review a young adult book. That was a very cool idea. And I suddenly thought, why are we asking adults to read
I
to read
know.
this? Leslie's saying, thank you so much. Leslie, thank you for joining us all the way from Canada. A delight to have you. If anyone wants to check out the Seattle Times review, it is lovely. Check it out. The link is in the comments as well. All right. Hayley, it has been a delight to host you. Thank you for this very illuminating, deep conversation. Thank you for this book. What a pleasure to get to know you and to have you here on Mystery Thriller Mavens. And I hope you will write another thriller, even though you'll have to kill another person on the page and another killer, so you can come back and talk to us.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. Appreciate it. Nice, great Monday night event.
Yay. Thanks for all the hearts up on Facebook, y'all. All right. I'll be back at the top of the hour with Wanda Morris. Stay tuned, mystery fans. I'll see you soon. Hayley, thanks again.
Bye.